first thing I want to show you is when you first log in to connect, this is the interface you get. It's the dashboard for performance. What I'm going to start with is maintaining users. So maintaining users is super easy. We go up here to the wrench for administration. Click that. Right at the top is users. I click users, and here are all my options for the users administration. Users, buttons, profiles, and so on. Click on users, takes me to that screen. And you'll see on the top here, all my users are listed, and at the bottom, all their settings. Over here on the right, there's these little icons that say expand details at the top and bottom. This lets you split that screen or unsplit the screen. So really nice if you want to see all the data. It's got a split and unsplit right there. So let's create a new user. There's two ways to do that. One, you can start from scratch. There's a button here that says new. It lets you start from scratch. Another way is if you have a user that you know is set up the way you want to copy it, you can do a copy. That's easy. I'll click Don Gulling. That's me. And click copy. Now it launches a copy of Don Gulling on the bottom. See that down here? So I'm going to maximize that screen and I'm going to zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. So now we're working on the copy of Don Gulling. So my son David is 16 now, and he's been coming to the office a couple days a week after school when he didn't have too much homework, and helping do different things. I call him my executive assistant. He loves that. So I'm going to set up a phone for David. David Gulling. I'm going to leave his extension in 1912. It automatically picks one, but you can make it any extension you want. If I try to make an extension that is already in use and I try to save it, it's going to tell me you can't do that. It's already taken, and by whom, right? So I'll put it back to 1912. His email is davidg@verteks.com. Don't email him though, he doesn't respond very well. And then there's a client username, I'm going to make it David G. So at this point, I can exclude him from the directory and make his extension private so people can't dial him by accident. If I want, I can give him a DID and pick from whatever DID groups I have already predefined in my trunk settings, or no DID. If I wanted to have PST and failover, this is for people who have multi-site. I can turn that on or off. Here I set the kind of licensing he has and the client license he has. What user group he's in. I'm going to put him in the VCI users user group. That gives him all his permissions. Talk about that in a minute. And that's all you need. I click save. Now David is a user. I'm going to unsplit this window, go to the top, and you'll see up here, let me refresh and click users. His extension's already been created. So that's maintaining users. Let me go to changing user settings. Oh, unsplit real quick. I missed something. Let me scroll down here. Oh. All right. So David is saved and he's in the system now. It warned me along the way and told me I forgot to enter the domain name there. So that's what that was. On to user groups. So user groups and what they're used for, a little bit different. And you'll see here, I've already got this license violation. When we set up David's extension, it took one more license than I have. So it's warning me I've got to buy a new license. This contact sales will get you a new license. So user groups, I'm going to zoom this back to 100% so the whole screen fits, are used to maintain settings by groups of users. Once you set up your user groups, typically you don't change them a lot. However, it's a great way to give permissions and set up administrative controls. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit to the top here, and I'm going to show you what user groups we have internally, just so you can see kind of what these things do. Account code service, anonymous phones, audio conference, call recorder. I have a special user group for me, and the reason was I wanted to do a test of allowing me to do a monitor, whisper, and barge onto any other person's phone to see if we could restrict permissions and so on. So that's why I set it up. Paul has one as well for his. We have a test group we use for different scenarios, a training group. And this is our group for most people. Verteks Consulting Inc. users, VCI users. If I click on that one and unsplit the window and go to the bottom, you'll see here's all the options in that user group. The name, the class of service for telephony, and you can click here a link to look at those permissions. Class of service for call permissions, that's where you could limit dialing internationally or dialing 900 numbers. And class of service for voicemail, how many mailboxes, how many messages they can have, and so on. Also options about caller ID and so on. Now, what this also controls under user group is trunk group access. For a lot of us, if you have multi-site systems, you may have trunks at different sites. You may not want users at site A using trunks from site B. This is where you configure that in the user group. Give them permission to use that trunk group, right? That's what I've got selected here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new user group. Super easy to do. Just click new. Right at the bottom, I put a name. I'm going to put in here training class August 29th. I should have called it Dorian. So class of service telephony, I can pick it here. Allow monitor wish for barge, fully featured, minimally featured, partially featured. These are all fully configurable under class of service. Class of service call permissions, I'm going to give them no restrictions. Voicemail, I'm going to give them a large mailbox. The rest of it, I don't need to leave. I can leave alone. And I'm going to give them access to the Cox PRI that I have. And I'm also going to give them access to our ringleader, which is our backup SIP trunks in case Cox ever goes down. Click on save. And there's that user group that's already been created. Very simple. So that's maintaining user groups, adding a group, and changing group settings. Next, I'm going to move on to maintaining class of service. So under class of service, you've got settings for a lot of things. Let me pull up training here and click on class of service for telephony. So this is the telephony class of service. I set it up for training, and here's what training has. Call stack depth of 8. Call stack depth is how many calls you can have on your phone at the same time. It's a minimum of 2. Don't do anything less than that. 8's a lot, but it's fine. Max buddies, that's your contact list in the client. Private contacts, 3,000. This is for Outlook integration. If you have a lot of Outlook contacts, and I have a lot of them, I have more than 3,000, it'll only suck over the first 3,000. This you can change to up to 100,000. Just remember, when you increase it, if they have Outlook integration turned on, when they first boot to sync that Outlook list, it's going to take a minute. Additionally, you can turn on allow call pickup. Pickup is when somebody else's phone is ringing. I can hit a button, grab it, or hit an extension and grab it. Allow trunk to trunk. You can see a lot of settings in here. One thing I want to talk to you about is a lot of these things go pretty deep down the rabbit hole. So how do you know what they mean? Mitel has done a great job of giving us documentation and keeping it up to date. This is a documentation link right here. The administration guide is always linked there. You click that, it takes you right to this admin guide. Now, the downside of the admin guide is it's 800 plus pages long. So that makes it difficult to read the whole thing. However, thankfully, we've got search capabilities, right? So I go to user group, and you can see all the preferences for user groups are there. I'm going to jump down to the one configuring user groups, and you'll see it takes me right to it. In this configuring user groups, it talks to me about every single option, what those options are used for, how do you edit them, how do you set up parameters, and what those mean. It also has other links in here that you can go to other parts of the admin guide and get more details. So super simple to navigate and find, and I still use it when I want to get an explanation or something. I'll send snags of this to users to ask me questions. So that's the admin guide. So in user groups, you're going to make all your settings. At the end, you're going to click save. and it's saved. User groups is also where you're going to configure intercom permissions, whisper page permissions, barge in and record permissions, as well as silent monitor. All that's done at the user group level. So when you're wanting to maintain user groups, you go over here to the wrench, under users, user groups, there they are. You want to maintain call permissions or class of service, they're right here. Telephony permissions are here. Call permissions, which is internal, local, long distance, and no restrictions, and then voicemail and how many boxes are allowed. That's all right there. So on a large mailbox, you can see I've got it set to 480-second incoming message length, outgoing 240 seconds. You can make them longer, especially if you're going to want to do a broadcast message, maybe for the hurricane, right? You might want to increase that so you can leave a longer or send a longer broadcast message. You could change it to 3600, just like that. Now ours is changed to 3600 seconds. The rest of them, the default options are checked. I think most of them are very easy to understand. Allow access to broadcast distribution list. I showed you that broadcast distribution list. You can turn that on or off. Maybe you don't want users to have permissions to use that broadcast distribution list because you view that as something for leadership only. When you set their mailbox permissions, you can uncheck that. They can't do the broadcast list. Same with distribution list. You can allow or disallow access to distribution lists right there in the voicemail permissions. Those are super easy to understand. One thing I do want to show you is under telephony. This is a trick. We see this a lot. I'm going to scroll down here. Under the directed intercom. Directed intercom is when you want to dial someone, and even if their phone is set to out of office or in a meeting, you want to go over speakerphone. That's what directed intercom does. If you are worried about people using that feature or abusing that feature, this is where you can control and turn that on or off. So that's the maintaining user groups. I'm going to move on to call control and talk about hunt groups. So far we've gone over maintaining users, maintaining user groups. We've gone over a class of service, and now we're moving on to call control. Call control is under features. You see a main heading here that says call control. Under call control, we've got account codes, bridge call appearances, hunt groups, paging groups, pickup groups, route points, codecs, codec lists, and so on. Let's talk about hunt groups. I want to give you one word of warning about hunt groups. We've seen several companies that found out how to configure hunt groups, and then they set up hundreds of them. The issue with hunt groups is there are limits, but Director doesn't warn you when you exceed them. So proceed with caution. The reason I say that, if you set up too many hunt groups with too many members, it can cause problems. Those problems can cause erratic system performance. A ShoreTel switch is limited to 16 hunt groups. Membership is also limited. If you want a system health report, we will send you one, and it will tell you exactly what your limits are and if you're good or not good. Another little trick, which is nice for anybody who has VMware, you can spin up a free vSwitch, no cost. You just have to have the VMware instance for it. It's a Linux OVA file. And with that vSwitch added, you can put as many hunt groups on there as you want. vSwitches will hold hundreds of them. So if you want to use hunt groups heavily and you don't want to overtax your switches, we recommend a vSwitch. And there's no cost for the hunt group on it. There's no cost for the vSwitch. It's very easy to configure and set up. Doesn't take long at all. So in hunt groups, I'm going to go over first maintaining and modifying. Let me go to Helpdesk hunt group. Here's a hunt group we've already pre-configured. Keeping in mind that at Verteks, we use the Mitel contact center. So when you call our Helpdesk number, 877 Verteks, you're reaching a contact center extension, not a hunt group. However, we set up hunt groups as a backup in case every Windows server fails. This lives on and resides on a ShoreGear switch, this switch right here. And switches are outside of Windows. That's a separate piece of hardware, so it gives us a lot of redundancy. Every hunt group has an extension, just like anything else on a Mitel system. The backup extension is set to an individual user, in this case, Paul, our service manager. Here is where you set the switch's residence, what switch it lives on. The 50, a 90V, and a vPhone switch. Those are my options. I'm going to leave it on the 50 where it's at now. Call stack of 8, and then distribution pattern. So distribution pattern, top down or simultaneous. Simultaneous, all the phones ring at the same time. Top down, it goes in order. It rings, Paul, then Don, then John, then Trey, then Jeff. Very simple. And remember, right here in your admin guide, of course, you can just search hunt group, and it'll take you to configuring hunt groups and give you all those options. And it even talks about maximums and so on. All that's in here. So that's there for you as well. Scrolling down, here's a couple of important ones. Call member when forwarding all calls. So what does that mean? If you have a hunt group member, and that hunt group member has set up his phone to forward all calls to another extension, do you want the hunt group calls to go to that extension, or do you want them to go to his or her phone? This means it goes to his or her phone and not to the next extension. Next, skip member if already on call. So hunt groups a lot of times are used for coverage of frontline or operator, or you name it. Maybe that person's already on the phone. Do you want them to still get a call if they're already on the phone and maybe toggle to the other call and then come back? You can skip them and not ring the phone if they're on the call, or we leave it to, or not skip them and ring it when they're on the call. We leave it to skip because typically in a hunt group in our environment, if they're on a call, they can't take another, they can't put it on hold for lots of reasons. They want to take care of the client they have. So that's that feature. If the hunt group is full, where does it go? It rolls over to sales. If the hunt group is no answer, where does it go? It goes over to sales. These can be any extension. They could be a person, they could be another hunt group. If it's off hours or holiday, where does it go? And then do you want it on a schedule or not? Hunt groups can be triggered to be on a schedule. So as you can see, hunt groups can be very sophisticated. They can be kind of a light call center. A lot of options in there. I'm not going to change that one. I'm going to create a new one. Here's my new hunt group. I'm going to call it Doria. Leave it at the extension 1913 that's there. Under backup extension, I'm going to have it come to me. I type 1450. I'm not going to have a DID on it. I am going to make it private. I'm not going to have it in the directory. I'm going to put it on the V switch. I'm going to leave a call stack of 8. I'm going to have simultaneous ring. Let's set it for 4 rings. I'm going to call the member, and I'm not going to skip it if they're on a call. If the stack is full, I'm going to set it to 1450. If there's no answer, I'm going to set it to 1450. And I'm done, and I can hit save. That hunt group is there right now, Doria. Super easy. You'll see it right here at the top. I can also delete a hunt group. Now it's deleted, and it's gone forever. So that is maintaining and modifying hunt groups. Next, I want to move on to call control, maintaining and modifying pickup groups and paging groups. Let me reset here. So for call control, maintaining and modifying pickup groups and paging groups, it's under features, under call control, and down here you see paging groups and pickup groups. Maybe you want to set up a paging group inside the building for storm readiness. You want to have an all-call group, let everybody know, hey, with the power outage imminent, please prepare, save your files, shut down your workstation, etc. Whenever you set up a paging group, please remember, paging groups use network bandwidth and therefore do have theoretical limits. Also, if you're paging across a multi-site network, remember, those pages are probably going to stop at the WAN perimeter unless you've got special configuration set up. For those of you who are super technical, pages come from the HQ server or DVS. So if you have DVSs at remote sites, you can leverage that for your paging groups. So I'm going to set up a new paging group. I just click New at the top. Down at the bottom here, you'll see New Paging Group. Zoom in for you. Let's call this one Doria. Extension 1913. We know that's free because we just deleted it. This is where you determine what server it lives on. So this could be on a DVS at a remote site. It could be on your HQ server. This is the name of our HQ server, cdirector.verteks.com. I can exclude the paging group from the directory, which is a good idea unless you want people to be able to page from the outside. I can also make that extension private so it doesn't show up in internal extension lists. This one's a good one. Enable priority paging. If you enable priority paging, it will override the user's call state. And what I mean by that is even if you're on the phone, the page will come through. Back here in the admin guide, if you look under paging group, configuring, they'll talk about priority paging as well, and all the parameters right in here. They also talk about multi-site paging, which I just mentioned. So priority paging, just remember, if it's a normal or non-urgent call, it will not go through if the phone is in use. However, if you want it to go when priority paging and it's turned on, recipients hear the full audio whether they are on the call or not. So priority paging is great if you want it to work that way. Just remember, someone's call could be interrupted. And you can set that for either deliver it via the speakerphone or the active call path. The idea being if they're on a headset or a handset, it'll come over that. If you deliver it via speakerphone, it'll always come over the speakerphone. There's also an extension list. This is where you configure who's in the paging group. Right now it's set to this BP, right? I'm gonna check that list out. Actually, let me save this first. Let's go to that extension list. You'll see there's an extension list here called BP. I'm gonna create a new extension list. I'm gonna call it Doria priority page. That's the new extension list. And I'm gonna put kind of everybody in it. Let's do this here, make it a row of 50. All those folks are already in there. I'm gonna click all these people. Give my son David, he's in there now. Now they're all in there. I click save. I've got Doria priority paging. I go back over to my paging groups, extension list, Doria priority page, and save. So now extension 1913 is a priority paging list. It's going to the group that I just selected. It's got override turned on for priority page over the speakerphone. So I'll push a button, dial 1913, it'll dial them. Somebody just asked a question, can we put 150 people in a Doria priority paging group? The short answer is, yes, you can put 150 people in there. If you do that, what I recommend you doing is increasing this group paging synchronization delay. The reason is, otherwise, it can kind of bounce around. So yes, you can. If you put that many in there, it's using network bandwidth from the voice server. So just remember, if they're all in the same building, it'll probably work. Increasing the delay would help. Another thing you can do is, make two groups, A group, B group. So try it with your network bandwidth, you'll see. The reason I keep mentioning bandwidth is each page is an audio unicast, not a multicast. I would increase the group paging synchronization delay to 5 seconds in that case. So that's what I would do on a large group like that. They do talk about that in the admin guide as well. If you want to talk about the delay, they'll talk about the delay up here and explain why. So really good information. I'd recommend you kind of just look at that just so you understand exactly what's going on. You're not going to break it by making the group too big. You might just get the page will bounce around because it can't page everybody at once. So that's a great way to use that feature. Hope that answers your question. So that was paging groups. I'd like to move on to pickup groups. Let me just reset here for a second. Let's go back to main maintenance window. So if you first log in, you're at your dashboard. We're going to go over pickup groups. You're going to go to the wrench. You're going to go to features, call control, pickup groups. What's a pickup group? Well, I'll tell you. Let's say you've got, 5, 10 people all working in the same kind of bullpen area, and they cover for each other when call volumes are high or they're busy. They might hear, John's phone ringing or Jeff's phone ringing or Bill's phone ringing, and they want to grab it from their phone. What you do is you create a pickup group, assign that group to a button on their phone. Now, all they have to do is press that button, and it'll grab the call from any phone in that group. We use this heavily in hunt group coverage, right? A word of caution. Please do not use pickup groups in a contact center environment. That's the one place you don't want to use it. It's okay for hunt groups. It's okay for work groups. Do not use it in contact center. It breaks reporting and causes all kinds of issues with reporting. It'll function, but the reports will be wrong. So I'll click on pickup groups, and I can create a new one. I'm going to call this one sales, right? I'm going to leave it extension 1914. I'm going to put this on our vPhone switch. I know I've got more juice there. For now, I'm going to leave it at this BP extension list. I'm going to go change that in a second. So I'm going to go to extension list. I'm going to create a new extension list. I'm going to call it sales group, okay? In the sales group, I'm going to save it. In the sales group, I'm going to put in, let's sort by extension because I know the extension numbers. Make this 50 users. And I'm going to put in here, as you can see, I've got 3 phones on my desk. Don Gulling, Don's cordless. So I'm going to add me. I'm going to add Trey. I'm going to add Matt and John, as well as Jeffrey and Ryan and Derek. So now there's a pickup group with Don, Trey, Matt, John, Jeffrey, Ryan, Derek. I click save, and you'll see that's listed as sales group. I go back over to my pickup groups. I go to my sales group. I change it to the sales group extension list, hit save. Now all those people are in the sales group. Under users, let's click on Don Gulling here. And you view my programmable buttons. Here are my buttons down here at the bottom. Scrolling down, we find a free one. I've got a call appearance here. I'm going to change that to pickup. And I type in the pickup extension that I just had there. Now I've got to put a name on it. I'll call it pickup. So you can't see what's on my phone, but right now it has a button there that says pickup. So let's go on to auto attendants. This is going to be a hot topic. Auto attendants are really important. We talked about earlier setting up an auto attendant potentially for a hurricane. Features, auto attendant. That's where it's at. I kind of clicked around for a second. You can also type in auto attendant and you'll see it takes you right to it. Super easy to find. So here are my auto attendants. I covered earlier what they are. I want to show you a little bit more in-depth auto attendant though. This is our voicemail, our primary auto attendant for Verteks Consulting. So our main auto attendant is extension 1400. It has an on hours mode. Here's what that on hours mode does. This is a prompt text. This is not text to, or speech to text. It's typed in there, but we keep it in there kind of as a holding place so we know what's in there. And I scroll down, and here's where I change all my options. Right now, there's no option for extension pressing button number 6. I can change that easily and say, okay, for 6, I want it to go to, let's say, a new menu, 1911, hurricane update. So remember earlier when I showed you the hurricane update, I talked about dialing in the voicemail system, hitting pound, typing 1911, typing the password, and so on. I could just set up this hidden option 6, not announce it in the menu, click save, then just dial it by pressing option number 6. So that's an option that you can use. You can also play, record, import all your prompts from here. Very easy to do. Remember, you have on hours, off hours, and you have holiday schedules as well. In holiday schedules, the question we get asked all the time is, how do you determine it's in holiday mode? Just remember, it's in the schedule. So the schedule is linked just by clicking this. I go to the schedule. Here's my holiday schedule. Right now it says Labor Day, 9/3/2018. As we know, that's an old Labor Day. Labor Day is going to be observed this year on 9/2. So I'll fast forward to September 2019, 9/2, and now Labor Day is set for 9/2/2019. With what's going on with the hurricane, we're still determining exactly how we're going to handle coverage on 9/2. We may just be open. At this point, we have our on-call team ready on Monday. We may leave it that way as well. We're just going to kind of play it by ear until tomorrow. So that's auto attendants, creating, maintaining, and modifying. I also want to talk about workgroups. That was a question that was submitted. Users should ask, how do I set up workgroups and what are the workgroup options? So I'm going to go to workgroups and look at the workgroups that I have configured. I've got a test workgroup, the Verteks main workgroup, and a general mailbox workgroup. Those are the 3 I have today. Let me set up a new one and walk you through some of the scenarios. So I'm going to click a new workgroup. You'll see down here at the bottom is the new workgroup. Let me zoom in a little bit. Let's call this VCI training. I'm going to leave it at the extension it gives me for now. No need to change that. Backup extension of a workgroup, we typically make a hunt group with the same members. The reason, workgroups live on the server, the Windows instance of HQ or DVS. Hunt groups live on the switch. So by having a backup extension of a hunt group with the same members as the workgroup, you've got redundancy. If your HQ or DVS server ever goes down for any reason, any cause of that workgroup will go to the hunt group on the switch. It'll still be operational. I'm going to go ahead and set it to just my extension for now. Do you want it in the directory, yes or no? No. And I'm also going to exclude it from the internal directory. I'm not going to give it a DID. This is where I set the user group, the server that it lives on, the language, and does it have a voicemail box of its own or not. Keeping in mind, of course, you've always got the ubiquitous configuring workgroup section of that application admin guide, which is super, super deep, right? It goes all the way into the weeds, covers every single option. They're all in there. I'm going to go through a couple of them. I'm going to click on routing. Here are my options. I can tie it to a schedule. I don't want it to run when we're in on-hours mode. I can choose my distribution pattern, top-down, round-robin, longest idle, or simultaneous. I typically go longest idle. That sends the call to the person who has been on the phone the least. Call forward on no answer or busy. Where do I send it to? Typically to voicemail, but you can send it to an auto attendant. You can send it to a user. All kinds of things to think about when you're mapping out. I do a diagram of what you want this workgroup to do. How many rings on the workgroup before it goes to a voicemail, and how many rings per agent. It's bouncing from person to person now in the longest idle mode. First person doesn't answer it. How long till it goes to the second person? I usually make this 3 and 9. That gives it 3 agents, 3 rings apiece. If everyone's logged out, where do I send it? Again, that could go to Auto-attendant or go to a hunt group or an extension. And those are those settings. Now I can set the members. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple people in there. Let's change this to 50. Scroll down to, put there Matt, and let's put in David. So Matt and David are both in there now. I'm going to click Save. The work group is created. Matt and David are in it. Go back to members, you'll see, scrolling over here, they're both in, but they're both logged out. I can log them into the work group from here. Now they're both logged in. I hit Save. David and Matt are both logged into the work group. That's setting up a new work group and some of the options there. Lastly, the question that was specifically asked was about queue handling. I'm going to touch on that, and then we're going to get into some reporting. I'm going to hand it over to Pete Hornberger here in just a second. Queue handling. Queue handling has multiple steps, and you can also loop it back. For setting up a new work group, if you really want it to work its best, I highly recommend you consult with us, because it's not really a matter of the clicks and the checkboxes. It's more about the understanding of the call flow. That's a little bit trickier. However, again, great details here in the admin guide. It really goes over everything in the routing tab. Distribution patterns, call forward settings, it's all in here. How to do multi-steps, the destinations, what they do. But it's a long section of the admin guide. It's multiple pages long. So our guys have done this for years and years. They can help you out. We're glad to do it. However, if you want to do some yourself, you always start with step 1. Uncheck, skip this step. I type in a prompt, thank you for continuing to hold. We appreciate your patience. Please stay on the line. Now, you can choose to or not to announce the estimated wait time. It's tricky on step number 1 on estimated wait time, because those estimates can be off sometimes, because it's using a formula that can't take every factor into an account. On step 1, I typically skip the do not announce wait time. Step 2, maybe I announce it. So we're gonna set that there, and then I can record that prompt, and I can move on to step number 2. Step number 2, uncheck, skip this step. This time I'm going to leave the announce estimated wait time. It'll do that without me prompting it. I just leave that checkbox. You could type, we are experiencing high call volume. You remember that one, right? Please stay on the line. We appreciate your patience. If you'd prefer to leave a message and receive a call back later, please press 2. Otherwise, please hold. Then I go down here to option number 2. I'm going to transfer to an extension and pick an extension that's a mailbox that my work group is monitoring, and that's going to allow them to get a message. Step number 3 and 4, I'm skipping. Step number 5 is not skipped. It's always the last prompt message, and here's what I'm going to do there. Usually I'm going to loop it back to number 1. Overflow, interflow is an option to overflow from one work group to another work group and continue to maintain their wait time, so that if I overflow to another group, the person doesn't lose their position in queue and so on. Just remember, a lot of these options can be tricky, and they can accidentally blow up on you. So I'd highly recommend either consulting with us or giving this a once over, doing it in test mode, and then once you've tested and verified it's working the way you want, then kind of roll it out into production. So lastly, I want to go on to some reporting. I was asked a couple of times about reporting. I definitely want to show you that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly pass it over to Peter Hornberger after I show the internal reporting. So Mitel or ShoreTel does have built-in call reporting. I'm going to show you, you got about a dozen canned reports here. These are built in. This is the most popular, I think, is the user activity summary and detail reports. I'm going to add my extension in here. I'm going to do a start of the beginning of the month until today. I am going to not show internal calls. I'm going to leave it showing external calls only and run the report. This is going to be a report of my calls on my extension over the last 29 days. Probably take about a minute. There we go. So this is the user activity report for the month for me, for my extension. As you can see, it's 9 pages long. Here's all the calls I had in or out, but not internal. It shows date, time, in or out. Was it a WAN call? This is, I placed the call was transferred, the number that was dialed or that dialed me, what channel on my T1 it came in on, and how long the call was. So I'll go to the end, scroll down, you can see my totals here. So far this month, I've had 210 calls, 9 hours and 48 minutes on the phone, average call length 2 minutes and 48 seconds. Now, if I want to export this, I've got some options. Up here on the left, I can click Export Report. I can send it to a PDF. I can drop it in Excel, or I can do an Excel data only. This is my favorite way to do it, personally. Excel data only. I click Export, it'll pop it up right at the bottom here as an Excel spreadsheet. Once I have it in Excel, I can manipulate it any way I like. If you're familiar with Excel, you can do sort, filter, auto filter, all those things. I'm going to do one for you real quick. I'll expand this out so you can see it better. Increase the size of the font some. A little too small almost, right? Once I have this, that way I can now, you can see a little glitch, right? This is something I'm not proud of, but it's been there for forever. The way it does the data only, it kind of doesn't map these fields right, okay? So you have to move them around yourself. I kind of hate that, but that's the way it works. So I can now do a filter. Click this, sort and filter, filter. I can go to the dialed number. I can do a text filter because it thinks it's text, not a number, because it's got the plus sign in it. And I'm going to do my wife's cell phone. As you can see, I called her one time from my landline. I usually call her from the cell phone, obviously. I called her one time, talked to her for 20 seconds. That was on 8/13 at 2:59 p.m. I can also, clear that filter and let me search for another one here. That's the most popular. Actually, here's a neat trick. Unfilter it. Go to the bottom. Take these things out. Neat thing you can do with this report is you can dedupe it by called number or dialed number under data, remove duplicates, and then choose the one that says dialed number. It tells me 121 duplicates. These are the 89 unique numbers that I dialed throughout the month. So that's internal reporting, dropping it to Excel and manipulating it. Again, you've got about a dozen canned reports built in here. Some good ones on Workgroups are not too bad, but they're limited. What I'd like to show you, I know a lot of you have this. A lot of you have BrightMetrics. If you don't have BrightMetrics, you'd love it. I do want to pass this over to Peter Hornberger real quick, Peter, so he can show a couple of top critical things in BrightMetrics and also talk about the new BrightMetrics interface. Peter, I'm going to go ahead and make you a presenter and send it to you right now.
Thanks, Don. Hi, everyone. I will be brief and just show you a couple things today and share my screen. For those of you, Don alluded, a lot of you have BrightMetrics already. Don and the Verteks team have been a great partner of ours and been really good about rolling out our offering to a number of you. So if you have BrightMetrics, what I wanted to show you today, you probably know a lot about the reporting already. You may or may not have seen some announcements in app about us releasing a new UI. We've been a company for, gosh, close to 10 years now. And about 10 years ago, we built a piece of software and focused on features for a long time. And over that, you can imagine it started to look like it was built 10 years ago, because it was. So over the last 18 months, my developers have been working really, really hard to come out with a fresh new UI. So this is what it looks like, very modern, same Bright Metrics you know and love. All the functionality features are there. And if you are a Bright Metrics user and you've dipped in and played around with this, we would love to hear your feedback. We set out to create a new UI. We feel pretty happy about what we put out there. We're nowhere near done. We're continuing and constantly iterating our platform. So if you have thoughts or feedback around the UI, we want to hear those things. Easiest way to send in that feedback is support@brightmetrics.com. And anything you send over, I'm VP of product. That stuff winds up right in front of me. And I take those things really seriously. I want to figure out how we can continue to improve our product on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, and so forth. For anyone who isn't as familiar with Bright Metrics, hasn't seen it, you saw some canned reports there. We kind of take that to the next level. And specifically, I want to touch on just 3 things for you today. So first off, we can do dashboarding. So everything you saw that Don just showed you, those are Excel-based reports, your CSV Excel type files. Those are great for certain purposes. We can also layer in dashboards. So I know we're kind of, talking very much on the technical and configuration side. So I pulled up a system summary report here. This is showing me trunk capacity trends across 2 PRIs in a real live environment. As a customer, I have permission to use their data for these purposes. And I can see, what's their peak utilization on a daily trending basis. I can average that out over 28 days. And that's going to give me really clear indications. If tomorrow they maxed out their PRI, I see that their trends are pretty flat. So whatever's happening there is probably anomalous. And then we could dig in a little bit deeper into that. We also do the reporting. Don showed you a user activity detail report. We can also run a user activity summary report. And this is actually a report that we've recreated based on something that's available in the canned reports. The benefit here is you can manipulate and play with it in tool. So I can jump in here and see a list of all the users across this environment. I can see their call counts, inbound versus outbound. I can sort by these values. I can apply my filter straight in here. So if I say, hey, I'm looking for one person in particular, I can set a filter, I can change the date range. And then really the power here comes in the layout engine on the left-hand side. If you look at a canned report, any canned report that I could hand you or that you could pull out of the native system, you're going to look at that report and there's probably going to be 3 or 5 out of 15 things that are meaningful to you. And the rest you say, I don't need those. The fact that you don't need those doesn't mean you're using the report wrong. It means you've probably configured your system in ways that don't utilize what those things are measuring. That's not a problem. Don just walked through a bunch of different things that you can configure in the system. You may or may not use everything he showed you today. And what you need is reports that hone in on the functions that you are using and cut out all the noise about the stuff you're not using. The ShoreTel Mitel platform is exceptionally broad and has so much capability and feature set in it. It's what makes it a really, really strong offering. And what you need to do with that is kind of parse through it and figure out, well, what's the most important things for us? In Bright Metrics, you can easily start to dynamically build reports to support that. So a really simple example, in a report like this, I see a list of all the users and how many inbound calls they've received. If I want to see how do those calls get to those users, there's a simple dimension here that I can pull on called previous party name. And this is where we get into, what I showed you initially, standard report you can get to. This is not a perspective that you can get out of the canned report. And this will take, let me find someone who's interesting. I've got a user like, I guess Alistair. Well, no, that's not very interesting. Let me find someone else. Use someone like Ann Andrikin. Ann Andrikin's an ECC agent. So I can scroll down here and I can see Ann's had 155 calls. 2 of those were transferred from Kyle. Some of those were transferred from ECC IVRs. A bunch of those came from a work group, the utility billing operations. So really useful to be able to kind of see, here's an extension. How do things get to that extension? The other thing that I'll highlight here is Don showed you how to search through a list of calls by caller ID. That's one of the most commonly used functions in Bright Metrics as well. We just have a simple report that does that. You pop this up, you enter a caller ID value. That'll search all calls across the entire system over the time range you enter and let you easily find those call records. If I narrow this down to, let's say, just yesterday real quick, I'm going to run this for all caller IDs and pull up a record here just to show you something. So let me run that. And then
while he's doing that, I'll tell you, we get this request all the time for people saying, hey, customer says they called in, talked to somebody that we can't remember who, but the person gave them erroneous information or was rude to them. Okay, get that number, run this report, it'll tell you exactly who they talked to. And you can then pull up a call recording for using that tool and play it back. So that's one of the common uses of that one.
Yeah, so I ran this one really broadly, just kind of looked at all calls from yesterday. And this one's kind of an okay example. This is an example of a work group call that came in, got routed to a voicemail, left a voicemail. At least we're going to find you one that bounced a little bit more. It's always an inexact science finding an interesting call. But let me see if I can find you a fun one. Yeah, maybe, I think this one probably should be a little bit more what I was hoping for. So this cradle to grave report is going to summarize the call from start to finish and show us, how did this call flow? So here's a great example. There's a 53-second long call. It came in, it started on an auto attendant, sat there for 39 seconds, so hearing prompts, making a selection. From there, routed to this PED building work group. From there, sat for just virtually no time. Essentially, it passed through the work group and got sent straight to voicemail. So caller might dial in and say, hey, I couldn't get to anyone in this department. Well, here's the problem. No one was logged into that particular group, so it was automatically passing these calls forward into voicemail. That's the problem. We need to figure out who's supposed to be logged in, what were they doing. You could also see things like someone might have waited in a queue for a really long time, or someone may have gotten, answered and then transferred immediately to voicemail, or someone was just kind of deflecting that call. Those are the sorts of things that the cradle to grave can draw out. As Don mentioned, our background, actually, we used to be ShoreTel providers 10 years ago. That's how we got into this space, doing the same kinds of things that Verteks provides for you. This was one of our #1 most requested things is, hey, what happened on this call? Don, said the same thing from their side. It's a pretty consistent common request. It's nice to have a tool where you can pull that up really quickly. The last thing I want to land on today is call flow reporting. For everyone on this call, because you're Verteks customers, you actually get access to some advanced functionality in Brightmetrics that we don't provide to all of our customers. Verteks has been a great partner of ours in our Premier Partnership Program, and as a result, you get some extra benefits for being their customer. The best of these is the call flow reporting. This is a diagram for those of you that have Brightmetrics. You can simply get to this by logging in. It's the third button down here in our Radiance UI called Call Flow Reports. You can choose any starting point in your environment and build on the fly a diagram that maps what that starting point is going to do when a call comes to it. Starting points could be menus, work groups, hunt groups, route points, dial numbers. For those of you on contact center, you also get to layer in IRN service and script. I jumped in here before I pulled up my screen and ran this for the UT main auto attendant, the primary auto attendant for this team. This is what that outputs for you. So you saw Dawn configuring and showing you the auto attendants, hey, when someone presses 1, go here, and they press 2, go here. This is a diagram that will map that flow out for you dynamically. It's a great way to check your work. If you're making changes, you want to see, well, how does that render in the actual flow? Come and run this diagram. So just to kind of illustrate this for you, I've got this auto attendant here that has 6 different options and a timeout. I can follow any one of those threads to see where does it go. So I've got 1 going to the utility billing main menu. I've got 3 going to an ECCRN. I've got 4 and 5 going to this off-hours work group. This customer's on Pacific time, so you can see I actually ran this and we're hitting their off-hours schedule because I ran this about an hour ago at this point. So I can see all those flows. The nice thing about this view is it makes it really easy to see if you are orphaning calls, so you're landing a call somewhere where they can't take further action, or if you're looping calls. And lastly, you can run this for different points in time. So we've got Labor Day weekend coming up. If you need to check and see if your holiday schedule is applied, you can choose that date and look at what this is set to do. You can also from here jump in and change the time if you're looking for a particular hour of the day. That is just scratching the surface of what's possible in Brightmetrics. One of the things that we love to do is provide demonstrations and free trials of the software. If that's something you'd be interested in, we're happy to sit down with you and walk you through it, talk to you about your own environment and use cases. But hopefully that gives you enough just to, for those that know Brightmetrics, to see the new UI, let us know what you think. For those that maybe haven't used Brightmetrics yet, please feel free to reach out to Verteks if you'd be interested in seeing any more of this. I'll pass it back over to Don.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that.